The bad news for representative democracy, the bad news for the United States and the bad news for the free world today is not the US Supreme Court ruling in Washington on presidential immunity, but the reaction of the President, Joe Biden. The Supreme Court ruling in a majority decision was good for Donald Trump, to be sure, because it makes it much less likely that he'll face criminal prosecution over disputing the election results or allegedly inciting riots at Capitol Hill on January the 6th, 2021. But the hysterical reaction from the usual coalition of Democrats, media commentators and activists is wrong. This isn't a threat to democracy. This decision actually elevates democracy. It helps to ensure that presidents are answerable to political processes and held accountable at elections, rather than having them thwarted by allegations of criminality and the sort of lawfare we've seen weaponised against Trump in recent years. So I reckon that's a good thing. As I've argued all along, and I'm no Trump fan, the way to defeat Trump has to be through political debate and the ballot box, not by running wildly exaggerated claims against him and cooking up legal action. Still, that's not the way the Democrats see it.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent.
That's absolute rubbish. Presidents, as always, will be constrained by political processes in their official duties. And if they do anything criminal outside their official duties, they're not immune from any prosecution. So this is what I mean by the bad news being the president's reaction today. Once again, he's exaggerating. Once again, he's attempting to create an inflection point where the decision isn't between two political parties. The election decision isn't between two political parties or two political candidates. Biden always tries to pretend it's a choice between him and the very future of democracy. This false binary is reckless. The Democrats and Biden continue to divide the nation by insisting that anyone who doesn't support them really doesn't support democracy. They conveniently forget how they said Donald Trump was an illegitimate president and how they called on people to join the resistance against him. Biden now says the Supreme Court is denying justice against Trump.
The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation.
This is dangerous invective. The Supreme Court ruling should be respected. After all, at stake here is the very principle of the separation of powers. The judiciary has played its role. The executive has its role to play, of course, as the president now realises. The power will be left in the hands of the people.
The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable. Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it.
Yeah, well, sure, it is up to the people. That's exactly the point. That's exactly as it should be. It shouldn't be up to prosecutors and judges and legal action initiated by Democrats to decide who will be the next president. It should be up to voters, and it will be up to voters. And this is where the American democracy is being let down so badly by Joe Biden, because as it stands, it's hardly a fair contest. Trump is wily, energetic and ambitious, and he's up against an incumbent president who is mentally and physically feeble.
making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
Yeah, that was the president just 5 days ago. And today, instead of pulling out of the race, Biden has fronted up at the White House and used this Supreme Court decision to try to pretend he's still capable and competent. The president called a late media conference for just before 8 o'clock Monday night, Washington time. He read his statement from a teleprompter. His scripted address lasted less than 5 minutes, and then he walked away without answering questions.
May God bless you all, and may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you. And may God protect our troops.
Why are you the best Democrat to beat Trump?
What makes you so confident you should be the president?
What advice did your family give Mr. President?
Yeah, that was it. So much for presidential accountability. This looks like a cheap soap opera.
Joe Biden, after cannonballing into an empty swimming pool on Thursday night, came out tonight and spoke for 4 minutes off of a teleprompter. He's good for 4 minutes today, as long as somebody else wrote it. After having this completely tone-deaf sort of announcement coming out of this meeting that you wrote about with his family this weekend, where his son, the notorious influence peddler and crack addict, Hunter Biden, says, you got to keep going. Also, they were hanging out with Annie Leibovich, the photographer, which I wasn't even aware she was taking mugshots now. This entire thing since Thursday has been one tone-deaf political disaster after another.
It's bizarre, all right, but sadly all this suggests that Biden is digging in. He tried to deliver a firm statement to voters and move on from the debate disaster. It might be easy for Biden to forget. It's probably lost on him already. But the rest of us can't forget it. What America needs more than anything else is a proper contest for the White House, a viable option rather than a bewildered commander-in-chief growing vague and weak in the Oval Office. Ominously, we've also heard from the First Lady. Jill Biden is on the cover of Vogue magazine and has given a defiant interview summarised as, "We will decide our future," which is pretty belligerent and pretty selfish when you think about it, because it's not just the Biden's future at stake, it's the future of the country. Some wags have fiddled with the cover, referring to nurse Jill Biden and saying, "Joe will run and he will like it," ventilating the view that the First Lady is pushing hardest for Biden to run again. And the nurse Jill Biden image immediately conjures up the unflinching and unnerving character of Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Would you please turn the television set on? The chief has got his hand up right there.
The chief voted. Now, will you please turn the television set on?
Mr. McMurphy, the meeting was adjourned and the vote was closed.
But the vote was 10-8. The chief, he's got his hand up. Look.
No, Mr. McMurphy. When the meeting was adjourned, the vote was 9-9.
Yep, Nurse Ratched was in charge, as it seems is Jill Biden right now. But she's not overseeing a home for the mentally ill. She's helping to shape the future of the White House. The central question being the extent to which they have become one and the same thing.